Thank you so much, Kerry. It's lovely to be here today. I'm also doing such a fabulous
Can't hear.
Try that now.
Can't hear.
How's that?
Get closer.
There we go. I'll lean right into it. If I sound like I'm yelling at you, please let me know. I'll leave it.
Pretty controlled.
How's that? Great. Well, thank you again. Forgive me, I will just say from the outset, I did not prepare this PowerPoint myself. If you see some typos, I don't want to know, and there may be a few glitches along the way. Bear with me. The Ian Potter Museum of Art is the University of Melbourne's art museum and the flagship institution of the university's 30 cultural collections. Founded in 1972 and originally housed in the John Medley building, which I hope most of you know, and which I only learnt recently, like the National Gallery of Victoria was designed by Sir Roy Grounds. The establishment of the University Art Gallery, as it was then known, had nevertheless been preceded by the development of a considerable art collection. The university's first acquisition, this rather striking 1854 portrait by Follansby of the Honourable Chancellor Sir Edmund Barry, was subsequently followed by a number of major gifts, particularly during the first half of the 20th century, by Dr. Samuel Arthur Ewing in 1938, Mrs. E. Phillips Fox in 1939, Stephen Courtauld, who was coincidentally the brother of Samuel Courtauld, who founded the Courtauld Institute in London in 1946, the Rupert Bunny Estate in 1948, Dr. Leonard Adam in 1960, Norman Lindsay in 1969, and the McGeorge Bequest in 1970. And it's the necessity of the care, management and display of these works that in turn drove the impetus for the development of an art gallery. After just 3 years in the John Medley building, the University Art Gallery moved to the old physics building, which is now Marriott Barrack, which is the Melbourne Institute of Indigenous Development, which had been renovated by architect Darrell Jackson. The next move wasn't until 1989, with the development of the Ian Potter Gallery and Art Conservation Centre, which was housed in the former physics annex on Swanston Street. In 1998, these activities were brought together in the award-winning Ian Potter Museum of Art, which is designed by architect Nonda Katsalidis, who you may know as most recently as the architect of the Museum of Old and New Art in Hobart, which has been described as an adult Disneyland. Truly fabulous place. And more recently, the current redevelopment of Video Art Gallery. The conservation services were separated from the Potter in 2004 with the establishment of the Centre for Cultural Materials Conservation, the Centre for Materials Conservation, or CCMC, as an academic centre elsewhere on campus. And at the end of this year, and I feel as a new director at the Potter, I should have a drum roll here, the last of the CCMC's activities in the old physics annex, which is a 1904 building adjoining the Potter, actually kind of wrapped around the corner on the left-hand side and backs onto this new facility. The CCMC will leave that space at the end of this year, and we will be entering into our next stage of development, so watch this space. The Potter, of course, is also the caretaker of the University Art Collection, which Kerry said numbers some 16,000 objects, making it the largest university art collection in Australia. It's a rich and varied collection of major holdings of Australian art in all media, from the early 19th century to the present, as well as holdings of European art, Australian and international Indigenous art, and classics and archaeology. 2 collection works have been incorporated permanently into our building, and you can see one here. Christine O'Loughlin's sculpture, Cultural Rubble of 1993 on the facade, which is not pink. This is actually during an outdoor festival that had a pink light on the work itself. And Napier Waller's Leaky Window, and I apologise, I couldn't find an image of this in situ, so I encourage you, if you haven't been to the Potter to come and have a look. Wallace Lecky window is one of the finest examples of Art Deco stained glass in Australia, and it was saved from the fire that destroyed Wilson Hall in 1952. It's now installed as a dramatic feature in the stair hall of the museum, and it literally descends vertically from the gallery's upper floors, appropriately signalling the museum's wide-ranging brief through its subject matter, which is the creation of the world and the artistic and cultural development of humankind through Greek mythological figures, and by serving as a strong historical counterpoint in an undeniably contemporary building. As a result of the number of substantial major gifts generously made to the art collection over the decades, some of which I've just mentioned, the collection is actually built around a number of named collections. These include, firstly, the Russell and Matt Bringway Begunya collection, which is arguably one of the most significant collections in the University Art Collection. Now, some of you may know, Sir Russell Grimwade had a close association with the University as a student, council member and Deputy Chancellor. And there's the Russell and Lady Grimwade bequest is an extensive collection of cultural materials in the Grimwade's estate, comprising works of art, photographs, decorative arts, furniture, almost 2,000 rare books, historical material and other memorabilia. The collection forms a fascinating insight into Grimwade himself, a man of wide-ranging interest embracing industry, science and art. Sir Russell's collection and the Grimwade home, the Gunya, was bequeathed to the University in Sir Russell's will of 1949 and presented after the death of Lady Grimwade in 1972. Some indicative images here. Given its diverse holdings, it's housed at the Potter, the University Archives and the Valley Library. The Grimwade collection provides a perspective on the visual history of Australia from the time of European colonisation to the 1950s, with dominant themes reflecting Russell Grimwade's desire to document the exploration, settlement and development of Australia as a nation and the growth of Melbourne as a city. Many prominent colonial artists such as Nicholas Chevalier, S.T. Gill, John Glover, Conrad Martins and Eugene Bondurant are represented, and the collection also includes one of the most loved and iconic works in the University Art Collection. This most fabulous painting by William Strutt, Bushrangers, Victoria, Australia 1852, which is based on a true event that happened on the 16th of October in 1852. Another notable collection is the Ewing collection, which was donated to the University of Melbourne by Dr. Samuel Arthur Ewing in 1939. A medical graduate of the university, Dr. Ewing was a keen art patron and supporter of Melbourne's cultural life. In 1907, he became a member of the Savage Club, which some of you may be familiar with, a meeting place frequented by Melbourne's intellectual and artistic circles that remains so today.
And me, could you speak a little closer to
Sure.
these? Sorry. To make it an ice cream, because we're not here. Thank you very much.
And at the Savage Club, Dr. Ewing befriended many artists and subsequently acquired their work. He made his first acquisition in 1908 with a landscape painting by Sir Hans Hyson, and over the next 30 years the Ewing collection was formed, with some 22 artists in all being members of the Savage Club. Interestingly, the Ewing collection provides us with an insight into the collecting style not only of an art patron and an aficionado, but also into the taste of the Edwardian period in Melbourne, where views of the Australian landscape and certain types of genre and domestic scenes were largely favoured. Comprising 59 works spanning the period 1862 to 1940 by Australian artists such as Louis Ribelow, Nicholas Chevalier, Bernard Hall, Frederick McCubbin, Max Meldrum, and as you see here, Arthur Streeton, Dr. Ewing donated his collection with the sentiments, and I quote, that our youth may be inspired with the beauty as well as a deeper love of their country by the works of our artists. While it seems almost inconceivable today, until the 1980s, this collection was actually housed in Union House. Norman McGeorge, his dates of 1872 to 1952, was an artist, critic, teacher and patron of the arts, and the Norman McGeorge collection includes over 270 watercolours, oil paintings and sketches by the artist that fully represent his career from his student days at the National Gallery School in the 1890s through to his maturity, painting along the Yarra and on the beachfront at Mentone. In 1970, McGeorge bequeathed Ballingag his home, which he commissioned from architect Des Browanier in 1910, along with the contents of his studio to the university. Situated in idyllic bushland in Ivanhoe at the junction of the Jarraban Creek and the Yarra, Ballingag was the home of Norman and his wife May from 1911 until her death in 1972, and was the centre of a convivial community of artists and friends, including Napier Waller, who painted this fabulous portrait of McGeorge, who lived just a few doors away. Since being bequeathed to the university, McGeorge House, as it is now known, has played a vital role as a residence for visiting artists and scholars within the McGeorge Fellowship Program. Artists in residence have included William Delafield Cook, Robert Jacks, Frank Hodgkin, John Hoyland, Brian Dunlop, Kenneth Rowell, John Smith, Susan Norrie, and the list goes on. And most recently, a contemporary Indian artist, Gigi Scaria. And the university is fortunate to hold works by almost all of these artists within the collection. Now, I could go on like this forever and that would be very dull. So rather than explain all of these collections to you today, what I thought I would do is just simply run through some of the named collections visually so you get a sense of both the diversity and the depth of the collection. I'm also pleased to say that the Potter remains the proud and very grateful beneficiary of donation of important works of art to this day, many of which make their way into the collection through the federal government's Cultural Gifts program, which enables donors to receive a tax break to the value of the work that they're donating. So if you happen to have great things hanging on your wall that you no longer have any use for, or you want a taste change, call me. So one of our very important named collections is quite obviously the River Stone collection. The Norman Lindsay collection, terrifying and extremely popular. The Hugh Ramsay collection, which has some very beautiful works within it. The Ludwig Hirschfeld Mack collection. Now, I'm not sure if many of you will have heard of Hirschfeld Mack, an incredibly significant artist who was one of the founding members of the Bauhaus in Germany. The university, believe it or not, has the largest and most important collection of Mack's works in the world. He came out as an immigrant during World War II, was interned in Chichura and a number of other internment camps of that time, and ended his career teaching at Geelong Grammar. We have very significant holdings of his work. It's truly fabulous. And also another great gem of the collection at the other end of the spectrum in timeline, I suppose, is the Gerard Herbst poster collection. Herbst was a graphic designer who taught at MIT and collected amassed a very large collection of posters that he was looking primarily at their design, most obviously, and importantly within this large collection of works are significant holdings of Polish posters. Our Classics and Archaeology collection, which is perhaps in terms of teaching one of the most active collections within the University Art Collection. Leonard Adam collection. Adam was an ethnographer who amassed a collection of international Indigenous art and artefacts. And finally, the Vizard Foundation Art Collection of the 1990s, which remains the property of the Vizard Foundation, but has been on permanent loan to the Potter for, since it was first started in the 1990s, and really includes some of Australia's most significant contemporary artists, and is effectively a time capsule of the period. So in terms of what we can achieve with this collection within the university, it's really quite fascinating. Now, being an art museum, exhibitions, of course, are our stock in trade, and undeniably the most public face of what we do. The Potter hosts a dynamic program of collection-based and temporary exhibitions, and some of these, such as our annual, again in association with the Vizard Foundation Contemporary Artist Project, which this year features Australian painter Stephen Bush, and the Basil Sellers Art Prize, which is a biannual award that celebrates the coming together of art and sport and opens this July, has successfully become some of the most well-regarded mainstays of the nation's visual arts calendar. And I'll just quickly run through a bit of a show and tell of what we've got on at the moment, because I'm wondering how many of you have actually been to the Potter, and if you haven't, I hope you will make your way through our doors after today. This terrific exhibition, The Piranesi Effect, brings together a range of prints, a range of Piranesi prints, objects from the university's Classics and Archaeology collection, and works by contemporary artists Rick Amor, Mira Gojak, Michael Graf, Andrew Hazewinkle, Peter Robinson, Jan Sandbergs, and Simon Terrell. This is just to give you a sense of the juxtaposition of the Piranesi prints and their kind of Baroque sensibility alongside some of the contemporary works. So this work here in the foreground is, believe it or not, a sculpture of carved polystyrene by New Zealand artist Peter Robinson. The Piranesi Effect reveals something of how Piranesi's images work with discordant charm on the viewer. It's curated by guest curator Jenny Long, and is a companion exhibition to the State Library of Victoria's current exhibition, Rome Piranesi's Vision, which was a joint project of the library and the university library. So it's been a great collaboration for us to be involved in. This is Stephen Bush, wearing an outfit that inspired the wall mural that is currently in the exhibition. As you can see, it was actually what he wore to his wedding in New York. This exhibition, Stephen Bush Steenhuffel, is the fourth in the Potter's ongoing series of Vizard Foundation Contemporary Art Projects, a creative initiative of the Vizard Foundation that offers mid-career and senior artists a $30,000 grant to produce new work. And this came about primarily through the Vizard, through the realisation of both the former director, Dr. Chris McCall, and the Vizard Foundation, that there is a lot of support for young and emerging artists within Australia and globally. It's this love of the new and the exciting, dynamism of seeing what young artists are up to. But if artists keep going, it's where they actually struggle, and we've been fairly poor at supporting our mid-career and senior artists. So the opportunity to actually work with the artists and commission new work through this project is obviously a great joy to the Potter, but of real benefit to the artists themselves. Now Stephen's show follows on from exhibitions by Jenny Watson, Jeff Lowe, A Constructed World, and Philip Brophy. And the exhibition, I've worked on this with Stephen and have learnt very quickly that it's madness to think you can curate shows and also be the director of the institution, but we got there in the end. This project shows work from 1980 to the present, and what he's done in terms of this notion of making new work and being a painter, where he came to us when we invited him and said, well, I'm a painter, I'm not a painter who wants to make video work, you're going to get paintings. And by the by, I work pretty slowly. So what he's actually do is he's created new work to brief, works on paper and paintings, but he's effectively thought of the exhibition experience itself as a form of new work. It's just an indication of one of the new paintings, Tim and Tool, from last year. And a sense of what Stephen has been able to do with the installation of his own work. So he's shaped, I think it's fair to say, a very particular viewing experience. The show ranges, has works in it from 1980 to the present, and it really has enabled audiences to see his work from across the decades outside of the linear and largely narrative framework of the traditional survey exhibition, where you started, 20 years ago and effectively work through to today. I think as a result, the exhibition is actually a really astute embodiment of and response to the challenges and expectations of making new work on the artist. And it also becomes a very powerful and playful meditation on the role and contribution of the artist in contemporary society, and that's something that Stephen continues to tease out in his work. We also have this fabulous exhibition on at the moment, The World is Not a Foreign Land, which has been curated by guest curator Quentin Sprague, and brings together the work of Indigenous artist Timothy Cook, whose work we see here, Jumbawa Marawili, Rusty Peters, Frida Wallapini, and Yapan Yapan Yunupingu. Now, the exhibition, in bringing these works together, crosses three geographically and it's fair to say culturally distinct regions. So we've got the Tiwi Islands, Kimberley and Northeast Arnhem Land. And what Quentin has tried to do with this show is to show audience how the works of each artist sometimes present quite strikingly different perspectives on what constitutes Indigenous contemporary art itself. So he's stepping outside of, very consciously working within the framework to step outside of the fact that we often see Indigenous art grouped by region so that you can understand it in that sense. He's cutting across that and looking first and foremost at the artists as great contemporary artists with unique voices, and then bringing them together to see within the context of the exhibition how the dialogue unfolds across the different works. So I think one of the great things about this show is it's interrogating sort of existing models, doing it quite lightly, and it's also a very open-ended exhibition experience, and that's something that I believe a university art museum should be able to do. We don't have to present things that come in neatly wrapped packages and are completely wrapped up for audiences. We can be playful, we can be exploratory. We can sometimes say, and I don't think we've done it in this case, that perhaps it hasn't worked. I see the University Art Museum as a place of innovation and openness and experimentation. And in doing that, we should just be able to effectively convey what we've set out to achieve to our audiences without alienating them or hopefully not scaring them along the way. It's just an installation shot of the show. So we've got Yapan Yapan Yunupingu's barks, very beautiful barks on the back, and some hollow log poles by Jumbawa Marawili and Yapan Yapan. And our last exhibition on at the moment is one of our classics and archaeology exhibitions, Jericho to Jerusalem, which is curated by the Potter's Curator of Classics and Archaeology, Dr. Andrew Jamieson, and involves an important partnership with the Australian Institute of Archaeology. Now, Jericho to Jerusalem focuses on Bronze and Iron Age pottery excavated by Dame Kathleen Kenyon, obviously at Jericho and Jerusalem. And Kenyon was arguably the most influential woman archaeologist of the 20th century and made particularly important contributions in the field of excavation techniques and ceramic methodology. So as well as just displaying these truly fabulous objects, the exhibition goes into Kenyon's innovations in terms of the field of her contribution as an archaeologist. Our schedule of between 10 and 12 exhibitions annually certainly keeps us busy, and we're soon to open our next archaeology exhibition, which I do hope you will join with. I'll send forward an invitation, called Secret Lives, Forgotten Stories, which features highlights from the collection of Heritage Victoria, and focuses on works or objects drawn from significant Victorian archaeological sites, such as the Eureka Precinct, a Chinese kiln site in Bendigo, the former Pentridge Prison, including recent discoveries related to Kelly and the finds of 2 shipwrecks, the Cheviot and the City of Launceston. Now, as a relative newcomer to this space, I've only been at the Potter for just on 12 months. I'm really actually quite excited by, not only this, the collections and the exhibitions, but the points of difference that the University Art Museum offers when compared to other art institutions, and by being able to work and importantly create in a context in which research, learning and teaching and engagement are first and foremost. To my mind, this presents an art museum with extraordinary opportunities. Functioning beyond both the demands and expectations of large audiences and blockbuster exhibitions, and this isn't to say that the needs and interests of audiences and the quantitative measure of attendance isn't important, and also I think the increasing pressure that we see, particularly in major cities, to present exhibitions as sort of entertainment experiences, and particularly with the display of contemporary art as vehicles of spectacle. I think the University Art Museum offers a quite significant point of difference. The Potters, by all accounts, a boutique-sized venue that's able to present a number of different exhibitions that tell a multitude of stories. And our activities and those of other university art museums are importantly based in research and scholarship. Rather than flattening out the complexity of the objects, contexts, histories and intentions that are contained within the works and conveyed through the dialogue created in bringing them together in exhibition, the University Art Museum has a responsibility to make these complexities available to the widest possible audience and to importantly ensure that they're accessible and relevant to 21st century students who are of course our future leaders and decision makers. So to this end, the Potter's working to build its connection to younger students. It's something that I'm very passionate about. In the first instance, secondary schools, and to still younger visitors and families by presenting a public face in programs that are welcoming and engaging. And I am under no illusions that this is actually incredibly challenging for a university-based art facility that can appear from the outside, and certainly not helped by the rather austere facade of our wonderful building. I mean, we can seem to exist solely for the university alone, so we have a challenge to overcome there. Our primary responsibility, however, is to students on campus, a potential audience at Melbourne of a staggering 45,000 people. But it's also no state secret that students remain the most elusive of all audiences for the campus museum. I'm fortunate, however, to have inherited an innovative program at the Potter, now in its 3rd year, that's going from strength to strength and making real gains in terms of student connection, visitation and engagement. The museum's academic programs, which are directly linked to and extend from the university art collection, are innovative, ever-growing and unique within Australia. Working closely with academics across faculties as diverse as arts, education, BCA, Melbourne School of Land and Environment, our former neighbours at CCMC, mathematics and statistics, law, biomed and science, our curators of academic programs, by effectively kind of unlocking the museum and its collections and acting as a guide, provide an avenue for academics to explore, engage and inspire their students through object-based learning. The curriculum engagement that the Potter's academic programs unit fosters uses artworks, artefacts and exhibitions in innovative teaching and research. And importantly, and in our increasingly screen-based world, their programs emphasise real-world engagement, so real art, not images, real encounters with other cultures and real debates. Our academic programs also consciously allow the museum to play an important role with regards to the Melbourne model and the University of Melbourne's interdisciplinary degrees, encouraging experimentation, intellectual excitement, a connection with social context and an embrace of cultural diversity. Over the 3 short years of the program's life, our curators have participated in the development of a mobile phone app called Float, with a team of students and academics that creates an interactive digital environment for visitors to the Potter where they can log their emotive responses to work. So it's quite fascinating, and then look at a work and track how other people have responded to that. So it was as simple as enabling visitors to hold this app in their hand, stand in front of a work that appears on the mobile phone, and it says, this work makes me feel, and you get a range of responses, angry, elated, happy, very interesting, and you can become part of a community that discusses the work itself. They've also developed a specialised program for medical and special needs dentistry students that works on the development of visual literacy and empathy through the study of artworks, so that development of those very particular and often lacking skills are then applied to clinical settings. And they've also worked closely with a good number of students from across various disciplines on internships and collection-based research. Both these and our public programs, which draw on the expertise of engaging speakers on campus and beyond, and I must say, I never cease to be amazed by the brains trust that we can call on at the University of Melbourne. It is really a privilege. Are a vital way of building relationships and connections across the university's various faculties, and of demonstrating the way in which a university art museum can make a very real contribution to public dialogue. As Corinne Glesner notes in her 2012 essay, Conditions of Success, the Exemplary Campus Art Museum and its parent organisation, and I quote, the current emphasis on interdisciplinary research and teaching reflects a larger cultural pattern that values teamwork and interdisciplinary knowledge as vital in a globalising world. As a laboratory for ideas, the Potter is uniquely placed to make a difference to the lives of our audiences, and within the unique space of the university to make the experience of art and the role of creativity both interesting and valuable to the next generation. It's an exciting and rewarding, and I should say ever challenging space in which to work, and I hope you will come and join us on our future endeavours. We will be pushing and changing, so come with us on the journey. Thank you. Yes, absolutely.
Kelly, I'd like to have a few questions.
Do you have any exhibition planned for the 25th of April next year?
That's a very good question. We certainly do. There's a number of, there's a combined and ever-growing committee at the university at the moment looking at the centenary of Anzac. I'll let you in on a secret with us that is still very much in the planning and dependent on not only on sort of bureaucratic and governmental relationships and agreement, but also funding. Professor Tony Sagona, who's an important archaeologist at the university, has been working at Gallipoli for a number of years on an archaeological dig, and we are looking to bring the objects that he's found at Gellatly as part of his research back to Australia and show those for 2015, which will be truly extraordinary. We're still, and the negotiations are complex, as you can understand, and we've got people working closely with the Turkish government to, facilitate bringing the works here. The idea is that we will show the works at the Potter in an exhibition in collaboration with the University Library. So they'll be doing a show that uses the cultural collections more broadly to look at Gallipoli and Gellatly as a sort of site of the imagination within the lives of soldiers at the time, so working through diaries and correspondence, and also the great artworks in the University Art Collection, and we'll show the archaeological works, and then the exhibition will travel back to Turkey. So,
dare I suggest something else? Penguin have, in the last few days, published a book of poetry of World War One.
Thank you. Well, I think that's one of the things that we have certainly started to do. We've always done with our public programs, but I think it's fair to say I'm pushing is to broaden our programs around the exhibitions out a lot further. So things like poetry readings would be absolutely essential in this context. And they just allow people to think about the experience of the exhibition and the works in a different way, rather than kind of closing them down. So thank you, I appreciate it. But yes, watch this space on that one. You'll know if I've succeeded next week.
Well, it is over a year away.
Yeah, not a long time in those kind of negotiations.
Just.
Yes.
Thanks. I guess all of us who've been in public life to any extent know rule number one is get the name right. So with two Potter centres, galleries, I don't know. I've long waited to ask someone this. How did this come about? What's the history and raison d'etre? And on a slightly more serious note, knowing the amount of work that Primrose Lady Potter has not only done but continues to do, how come there's two Ian Potter centres?
That's a very good question. And a simple and not so simple answer. I suppose we were, as I'd said at the start of my talk, the Ian Potter Gallery earlier on in our life, which then translated to the Ian Potter Museum of Art, and that had come about through the Potter Foundation's support not only of the art gallery but the University of Melbourne more broadly. And the foundation was a major contributor to the building fund that built the Norbert Katz-Leaders building in 1998. So the name, it was reflected in the naming of the gallery and its transition to museum, so Ian Potter Museum of Art. Lady Potter, as you say, is truly fantastic. She remains our patron and the most loyal attendee at every Potter event. She's a phenomenal woman and so informed in terms of the arts. But I suppose it's the difficulty of philanthropic bodies and the expectations in 21st century life of how your contribution is reflected. So there are two Ian Potter centres. It was completely obviously outside of the control of this Potter. And one of the things, and it is ironic because I've of course come from the NGV to this Potter, so I've worked in both of them. and within, I think it's fair to say, for the NGV in a way, but besides the fact that they have, the capacity to promote what they do in a much greater way, and their marketing reach is much greater than our fabulous but relatively modest University Art Museum. They also, I think it's fair to say, struggle with this because, of course, they have two campuses. So you have NGV International and what has effectively become known colloquially as NGV Australia or Fed Square. So I think local audiences can deal with it quite well. We have learnt a lot of visitors, and I think if people know they're going to the NGV, that's okay. The challenge for us is that they often think they're coming to an exhibition for us and they'll end up at Federation Square. So it is an ongoing issue. One of the things that we're looking at the moment, we're assessing our external kind of collateral, our book for our invitations and the like. And I have been thinking about whether we own the name colloquially in the way of NGV Australia and we just become the Potter. So we'll always be the Ian Potter Museum of Art, but we are the Potter. We've always been the Potter. So I think that kind of shorthand might help a little bit more. But you're right, it's confounding for interstate and international tourists.
Yes, it is.
But it's something we just have to live with. And I suppose in the end, I hope in building our profile, which I'm the first to admit we have, we can always make gains there, that you're just known as an art museum that has great programming and people want to know where that is and will seek it out. So, but needs to be resolved. Yes.
Yes, gentleman over there.
Just as an extension of that question perhaps, is the Potter within the university fully funded philanthropically?
We are very well supported by the university in that our staff are funded through a university vote, and there are a number of different endowments that have been established over the years that we can draw upon. But it's fair to say, in that sense, the university's contribution, I think it's a very generous model, but in terms of our greater ambitions, it's pretty flat. So we've been functioning sort of post-GFC on the same funding model for over 5 years. And of course that's difficult in any context, but particularly in an art museum context where you're supposed to be constantly pushing. And particularly I think when you're dealing with contemporary artists, and I'd like to see, we have worked internationally, I'd like to see us do that increasingly, and that comes with certain demands in terms of expenses. So it is part of my role to raise money externally, and increasingly so. But I mean, comparing ourselves to my colleagues in other university art museums, I'm not in a position to complain. We have a beautiful building that is extraordinarily well maintained, and we are well supported by the university. And sometimes it's not just, I don't want to sound Pollyanna about this, but sometimes it's not just the funding. I think in the 12 months that I've been in this role, I think the university's support of me and the Potter in terms of a significant institution that they see the value of, want to back and want to see to continue to grow, that's often not the case in the university context, where perhaps you can have a vice-chancellor who thinks you're great and that vice-chancellor will leave and you're suddenly in jeopardy. And we have seen that around the country. So we're also, I think importantly in terms of our governance, we're a semi-autonomous body, which there are a number at Melbourne, so MTC is one, we're one, sports, MUP. So we have a relative sort of sense of autonomy. I think it's important, it actually is helpful that we're not part of a faculty, but we obviously feel very strongly that we work back into the faculty. So the governance also helps.
One more question on this side of the room, maybe? Yes?
Is there a difference between an art gallery and an art museum?
That's a very good question. I suppose, look, the terms do tend to be interchangeable in kind of parlance. I tend to think of an art museum more as a collecting institution and a public institution, and galleries perhaps more as either commercial spaces or artist-run spaces and the like. So, but you're right. Within America, it's a much more clearly defined or delineated term. Within Australia, we tend to flip it around a bit. But I think the collection is actually key to that difference. So I would tend to think that the museum is a collecting institution rather than a commercial institution.
Thank you very much. I think